This video is going to focus on whether or not you, as a foreigner, can open a bank account in Brazil. Now, depends on your situation. It's not a yes or no question. If you're a foreigner living in Brazil with residence in Brazil, yes, you can open a bank account provided you have the correct documentation. If you're a foreigner who's just visiting Brazil and you want to open up a bank account, well, why would a foreigner want to open up a bank account who's just visiting? Say you fell in love with a condo there, or you fell in love with a house, you fell in love with a guy or a lady or somewhere in between, and you'd like to visit more often and it'd be convenient for you to have an account there, or you need an account to pay property taxes, to pay a condo fee, just to do anything to transact business, and you think it'd be easier doing it in the local currency with a bank account, and you're spending a significant amount of time there. Unless you have some form of residence, you basically can't open up a bank account there. So let's talk about the documents that you need to open up your bank account. You need some identifying documents. Personal opinion, and all of this is my opinion based on what I've read in my research, so it could be all wrong, but this is just my opinion. And leave a comment if I'm saying something that's not correct. You need a passport, but that's not like a requirement because a lot of people might not have a passport and they're Brazilian, so they can still open up accounts. But for identifying purposes, a passport's helpful, depending if you walk into a physical bank. But a lot of internet banks, this DeFi is becoming very popular. You also need a CPF. What's a CPF? Let's try to say it in Portuguese. Cadastro de Pessoas Físicas, or Natural Persons Register. It's basically like a Social Security card if you're American on steroids. It's needed for everything. Everything works off of this. And Brazil seems to be moving in the direction, just as someone from the outside looking in, of where everything to some extent is digitized, almost like following an Estonian model to some extent. But when you look at the size of the country, over 200 million people, you think it's very advanced. I mean, they know the possibility for Brazil in the future. A lot of folks there who are struggling, who times are hard, they don't see it, but a lot of folks in Brazil obviously see that there's tremendous opportunity in the future in Brazil. So you've got your passport, you've got your CPF, but most importantly, and this is where we're going to spend the most of the time in the video, which prohibits a lot of foreigners, extranjeros, from opening a bank account in Brazil, is your proof of residence in Brazil. Now, it's not prohibiting you if you're a resident, legally resident, with the correct documentation. It's only a problem if you're just visiting and you want to be convenienced, as maybe you could visit the United States, say, hey, it'd be cool to have a bank account here. You go through a little bit of a hurdle to secure yourself an individual taxpayer identification number, an ITIN, and then you can go ahead and open up a bank account in the United States and just come and go as you like and have an account here. It's set up that way. But Brazil's system, you're in a wholly different country. Every country around the world has a different system. Some might be very similar to something you're familiar with. Some might be totally different from what you're familiar with. But this, as far as I'm aware, and from what I've read online, this is their system. Does that mean it's a big no that you can't do it if you're not resident inside of the country? Based on what I've read, Brazilian law allows for it, but the banks just seem not to want to do it because from everything I've read, from every side of the financial sector, the banks are heavily regulated, and if they go astray, they will be fined aggressively. And they are very fearful of the fines and penalties, so they want to stay within the guardrails. Does that mean you cannot do it? You might be able to find some financial institution in the country that will open an account for you. If you do, please leave a comment below, because that will benefit a lot of people who are not able to establish residency or proof of residency in the country to open an account. And let's talk about some of the documents that the bank will look for or a financial institution will look for you to establish residency in the country. From what I've read, my experience, it seems the banking system exists for not just for Brazilians, it's a very open country, but for non-Brazilians that are resident of Brazil. The first document a bank or financial institution might ask you for to open up an account is a RG, Registro Geral. It's a national identification card. I think it's being replaced by a card called a CIN, which will incorporate your CPF number. So instead of having two separate numbers, you'll just have one number. But I think that's what's taking place. I don't know how that'll affect foreigners because you can get a CPF without being resident in the country because you have to own property or have a business reason for having a CPF. And everything seems to trigger off your CPF, but I don't know how they're going to work it when they start issuing this new card if they haven't already started to do it. The second document, which is super important for identification purposes in the United States, is your driver's license. Brazil, CNH. I don't know how they pronounce that, H or H, so just CNH, Carteira Nacional de Habilitação. If you have a temporary or a permanent visa to be in the country, I think you're eligible to be issued this CNH. Everything that I've read so far seems that it's pretty easy for you to get as long as you have the correct documentation, meaning your visa status is good for that period of time to get the driver's license locally. The benefit of that is you don't have to take that driving, and I don't want to say crazy driving test, but driving a stick shift or manual or standard, whatever you want to call it, is still super popular in Brazil. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I'm aware, everyone taking the driving test needs to learn how to drive a stick, has to take the test with a stick shift. You can't take the test with an automatic. That's the explanation that I've been given. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Very different in the United States. You have a couple cases all the time in the United States where somebody has tried to steal somebody's car, but they broke the window, but they weren't able to take the car because the car is a stick shift, and most people in the country don't know how to drive a stick shift. The final document that we're going to talk about is the Registro Nacional Migratório, RNM. I won't try to pronounce it in Portuguese. The National Migration Registry. It's a document given to you by the federal police, and it acts as proof of legal residency for foreign residents. So it's the primary ID for foreign residents living in Brazil. So those are a couple of the documents that you could be asked for. And it's not that Brazil isn't open for business. Everything in this video is totally my opinion. I believe that they are definitely open for business. They're open for investment in the country. They're open for people retiring. They have retirement visas. They have nomad visas, from what I understand. They're progressive in that way, but you just have to abide by their laws and their regulations. They invest a lot outside in the United States, probably in other countries too. There are companies that we'd be shocked to know that are owned by Brazilians. I think Pilgrim's Pride Chicken might be owned by Brazilians. Burger King and Popeyes are owned by Brazilians. The Body Shop used to be owned by a Brazilian company. So they've got a tremendous presence. There's a lot of exchange that goes back and forth between lots of countries around the world and Brazil, the United States, where I am, and Brazil. So you just have to follow the guidelines, follow the regulations. I tried to open an account thinking, oh, I've got a CPF. I've done a separate video about that. But now I can just go and open a bank account. Slow down, buddy. It doesn't work so easily. So hopefully this video is helpful for you. Be nice if you subscribe. Be super encouraging. But hopefully it helps you so you don't have to go pay a lawyer. Some lawyers give you good advice, but they might be able to come to the end result after watching this video that you can't, and save yourself 6-7 hours of research and study. God bless.